Daniel from Dark Matter is going to host the first one, and he's got an amazing panel lined up. I'm sure you've seen it plastered all over LinkedIn because Will is non-stop with the posts. But I'm going to let Daniel and then this panelists introduce themselves. But a big round of applause, please.
Wow, that was quite something to follow, actually. James, has he run away? James, friend or foe? Friend. I just wanted to double check. Cool. We'll see what happens after this panel. So I'm Daniel. I'm from Dark Matter. I probably need to give you a little bit of background. This isn't really me trying to give you my biography or trying to sell you anything, but it's probably give you a bit of context of why I'm standing here. Now, I kind of always tend to start with a confession. I'm firstly not a technologist, and I was formerly a marketing person. So it's not everyone's favorite thing. I'd like to call it professional lying. That's kind of what I felt like it was. And I was the guy behind a lot of the campaigns that were targeted to many of you to try and convince you to buy technology that maybe you needed, maybe you didn't. Well, about 5 years ago, I decided I wasn't really into that anymore. I didn't feel that it was right, and it felt a bit mucky. And I got to that certain age where I thought I should maybe try and do something a little bit better. So I started a new company, Dark Matter, and the central concept for this really is to work within sort of deep research within the community to find out what we believe is the truth about different types of technology and how that they can be applied. So we've coined this really as kind of strategic foresight, and we develop that for global technology brands, but also government departments as well. So along the journey, we had realized that deep research and qualitative interviews with people was really interesting, and we started filming them. And at this point, we decided that actually some of the views were so strong that putting them into a graph or a statistic probably wasn't doing anything justice. So what we did is we started creating documentary films. So we've worked with a lot of tech vendors who I managed to somehow convince to give me editorial rights on the film, that I would tell what I believe to be a balanced view and the truth of technologies and emerging technologies and how they work. So after a string of films looking at very much public cloud challenges over the years and the migration, we've obviously turned to AI because, let's face it, we can't get away from it. So we've been, over the last few months, trying to take a snapshot. And the reason I say snapshot is because we had to make this thing pretty quickly because, as everybody in this room knows, it changes every 5 minutes anyway. So we've taken a snapshot of what we are starting to learn from the conversations we're having, which are differing views. Many people think it's friend, many people think it's also a bit of a foe. So we've got a new film coming out in about a month's time, which I'm sort of here to sort of pimp, I suppose. And we're working with HPE and NVIDIA, who very kindly sponsored the film and are, I will say, brave enough to be able to allow me to tell a narrative that might not always fit within the parameters of what you might expect them to say. And this really is about them having, I think, the courage to realize that it's not short-termism in terms of selling different types of technologies, but this is the genie's out the bottle and we're going to have to do this right. So that's how we've got here. That's what we're up to. In a minute, we're going to talk with a couple of our guests and people who are actually in our film. But I thought the first thing we should do is actually play you a trailer of the first film. Now, we've put this together, especially for this event. No one's seen it yet. We're about a month away. So it's pretty raw, but I think you'll get a flavor of some of the thoughts and views. So if we're called to kill the lights, because it just looks better in the dark. Okay. Right.
AI has gone from science fiction to a kind of very, very stark reality.
It's crept into our lives. Now it's getting into the public consciousness. And I think it's a good time to try and address that.
I think AI is a fundamental shift in humanity.
This is a transformative force that I don't think we can ignore.
The greatest utility in the coming years will be in healthcare.
AI could be really good for, I'd love to see it being adopted, is for personalized teaching.
AI is moving fast, so if you want to take advantage of it, you need to be a lot more agile.
it may or may lead us to doom, or it may or may lead us to nirvana.
As much as AI is a big benefactor and an advantageous element for good guys, AI is also as advantageous to the bad guys.
Well, I don't see any point in working hard because AI is going to take my job.
It's effectively the biggest transfer of wealth that's ever been seen.
The energy and water use that is being proposed is not kind of sustainable, just on the most basic level. It's not even available.
There is a speed of change, a pace of change, which is kind of dramatic. And it's government's role to bring in everybody in, bring in citizens as well, and bring in people of this country to help them understand and to have an input into that pace of change.
So we need to make that shift and start thinking, how do we support that UK economy to create those jobs? We definitely have the skills, we have the capability, and we have the resources to do it.
To me, we need a lot more rules and regulations around it in order to retain the balance and make sure we actually use AI for good use, not bad usage.
Let's be very clear, if we build centralized compute on clouds where we cannot know that that data is staying in our country, when shit comes to shove, that's going to be a problem.
If we had data that was valid and was accurate, we wouldn't necessarily need a lot of the stuff that's being pushed on us today. You put shit in, you get shit out.
There is a sense of belief here. If only we could sort of organise ourselves in the right way to start to see those wins and get those results. And I honestly believe we are capable of doing that.
So after all the AI optimism, I kind of turned up like the harbinger of doom. I think obviously what we have here is a collection of different views, and I'd like to also welcome. I think we have. Here we go. So Professor Gopal, Mark Butcher, and Debbie, if you guys want to come up and join us. Right. Well, Mark was in the film. Gopal's in the film as well. Debbie might still be in the film, if she'd like to be. But we thought what we do today is really have a bit of a discussion about some of the topics that I found and I think are quite important and probably need clarification, because I'm not a technologist and I've spent probably 5 years deep in this topic. I found some of it quite emotionally challenging, if I'm going to be completely candid. You hear great things, you hear some troubling things. So I think I'm going to try and ask you guys to try and put my mind at rest over some of the topics that we're going to talk about. So the first one that I really wanted to kick off with, and I think what we'll do is I'll throw a question, and then if you guys feel free to kind of discuss that as we would normally do. I think, Mark, that as a FinOps and GreenOps expert, and who's spent a lot of time in and around public sector, I think my question is, when we see the consumption levels of energy that is required for AI moving forward, which is widely reported in the media to be lots, maybe sensationalized, maybe not, and obviously the cost of this type of infrastructure is not cheap. And considering, I guess, within the UK our sort of fiscal constraints and our net zero targets that we have, and how these are sort of not mutually exclusive, how do we think AI at any kind of discernible scale or deployment, is possible? Is it feasible? Is it viable?
So the answer, I think, I was firmly in the faux camp, by the way, when everyone put their hands up. There's no doubt about that. The biggest challenge I see is the reality is, could it be efficient? Yeah. Is it going to be? Absolutely not. If you're deploying AI at scale in any organization, I can tell you categorically, you have zero chance of meeting your net zero targets. You may as well rip them up and throw them away because you are not going to meet them. It's a physical impossibility. The challenge today is no one's actually measuring this with any level of accuracy. You can't get any facts, you can't get any figures. All we see are made up stats designed to suit whatever narrative is being pushed at that particular moment in time. So it's a real challenge. There's no doubt about that. And when you also look at a lot of the inefficiencies that creep into how services are deployed, we all like when we're building the business plan to focus on the nirvana, the fluffy side of it, the wonderful things that we're convinced we're going to achieve when we deploy this service. The reality is projects and programs never work out like that. So I'm working across a huge number of kind of public sector projects at the moment, trying to create a new emission standard for central government. And what we're finding is the way AI is being deployed or planned to be deployed at the moment is the most inefficient, built in the wrong way, in the worst locations, in the worst possible way, with no focus on efficiency, optimization, or design best practices. So the path we're going down is not a bright one right now. We could turn it around and we could do it, but we have to want to actually do it. And that requires a gigantic cultural shift in the operations. And what I'm constantly amazed at is we always hear the phrase, we have to do more with less. But when you throw the word AI into the conversation, suddenly the budgets open up and there's spiraling money coming out of every orifice. And the question we have to ask is, why are we doing it? And is there actually an outcome that is going to deliver any benefit? But apart from that, I'm quite positive.
I'm not feeling better.
Sorry.
Friends, please.
I can jump in on that one. It's working. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi. I'm Gopal Ramchan. I'm a professor of AI and CEO of Responsible AI UK. And I've been working on AI for the last 24 years. And I've seen different kinds of AI over these years, some more efficient than others. And we're investing a lot in those black box, billion parameter type models right now, thinking this is going to solve the problem. And we've been sold this dream. And it may not be that way, that model that solves all these problems that we think AI can solve. There may be more efficient models. And I think if we just invested into more efficient AI models, try to optimize them, and we've seen this with DeepSeek, not sure how much DeepSeek actually saves in terms of cost, in terms of energy demand compared to GPT. But clearly there are better ways of doing things. And there's a big question as to whether we should invest more into compute or invest more into making more efficient AI. I don't know if you know the numbers, but I'm sure it will come up in the film. One GPT search or image generation query can consume as much as a liter or half a liter of water in terms of cooling needs or different estimates. And there are a number of tools out there that can help us measure stuff, and then they are not accurate, as Marco was saying. There is a new tool out there on Hugging Face. It's been launched at the AI Action Summit called the AI Energy Score. Maybe you should have a look at that if you're interested in measuring stuff, because if we can measure it, then we can maybe reduce it and actually present the costs of AI to the wider public. Because right now, no one knows how much it's costing us in terms of water, in terms of energy, and what the demands will be in the future. And we should be measuring things more accurately if we want to change things.
Debbie, anything to add? I'm sure you've got something.
Big subject. Is this working?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So Debbie Johnson, I work for NVIDIA, and I'm working currently on how we're going to partner engage across central government, defence and secure to help build out the ecosystem to support AI use cases and our developer community. So a bit of a broad brief. The point I want to pick up on is we are in a process of developing AI. We aren't there yet. There are lighthouse use cases and industries where it makes 100% sense for us to gain these accelerated positions. Healthcare, we look at what's happening in automotive, for example. These guys are crying out and chomping for the acceleration and the automation that AI technology can bring. But we are working really hard at driving efficiency out of AI models because, as you say, the world, we've all got an insatiable desire for data, right? And that's kind of where it starts. But we need to be more efficient. We have to be more efficient. So, we're all looking at how do we create more efficient models? How do we build more automation into the models themselves to make them more efficient? So I think that's a really big point because we see the leading lights and we see the numbers around size of models and size of infrastructure and cost of infrastructure. But there's a scale. And I think going forward, we're going to be really focused on how we make those models more efficient to make that cost of entry more available.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to change it up a little bit because I want to talk about responsible AI. And I think the concept, and I think obviously we heard James talking about it as well. And you know, I come at this from a sort of naive perspective, I suppose. So please forgive the question in the way that I'm asking it. I think with the current AI models and the way we're using them and the way they're being deployed, the idea of responsible AI to some people will actually feel more like an aspirational idea than a sort of a practical thing that we can do right now. And I guess to refine that, there's sort of the inherent conflict between, you know, technology and human behavior and the way we choose to use these technologies and roll them out. And we know how important it is, obviously, to make sure it's being used responsibly for the right reasons, using the right types of technology. But Gopal, I guess, you know, from your perspective at RAI, you know, how are you seeing this? Is this just aspirational, or is this something far more practical and fundamental that we can do?
Right. So I run the Responsible AI UK, which is a big funded research program, skills and innovation program, and I talk to researchers across different disciplines, innovators, government agencies. And we come across, you know, different perspectives on what responsible AI means. And I keep getting into conversations where people ask me, what does responsible AI mean to you? And what will it do to you if the government changes its perspective on what responsible AI means? And for me, what I've come to realize is that everyone has their own definition of responsible AI. There are basic principles like it needs to be fair, it needs to be explainable, it needs to be accountable. But at the end of the day, responsibility lies with the person or the organization deploying it, building it, designing it, making sure that the data that you feed into it is being correctly curated and debiased in some way, or been correctly tested on, etc. So the responsibility still lies with the humans in many cases. And there are some fundamental principles that, you know, we try to capture within this concept of responsible research and innovation, where when you're building things, you think about the long-term implications of what you're doing. So just today, I just come out of a workshop with NHS leaders from Wales, England, and Scotland, and there was a suggestion in the room that, okay, well, we want responsible AI to ensure that the patients can request that some of the data should not be used to inform AI tools. Just take them out of the system. And that sounds like fair to the user, but that does take them out of the system, which means the AI will now not be able to serve those patients. So we need to worry about the consequences of taking out data from the system. So it's not just a question of listening to the users, which is one of the key discussion points. AI has to be designed with the users in mind. It has also to think about the long-term consequences of marginalizing people by removing their data from those systems. That's one of the aspects, and we see different implications in different circumstances. For example, in the energy sector or financial services sector, what processes are we putting in place to assure this AI? So assurance of AI systems costs money. It does cost a lot of money to assure the system, to develop assurance cases, to collect the evidence, to give confidence to the operators, the end users, that this is working correctly. There are very few models out there. There are very few methodologies out there that can be used to do that, and very few companies that can claim to certify the AI systems that are deployed right now. I'd like to meet them if they are in the room today, but there's no technical authority in the UK right now that helps us certify this system. So that's a big gap in developing responsible AI, which we're trying to address, and like to work with people like you in the room to address as well.
Anybody got anything
to that? If
please,
I may.
please do.
So it's a really good point, and I think along with recognizing issues and challenges and trying to address those up front. I've been involved in a couple of meetings in the last probably month where there are they're startups, but they're looking at how do they build validation and audit trail into LLMs. So you actually have a facility where you can validate who's put the data in, who's augmented the data, who's changed the model type, who's run it. And then you can build ways of locking out users or requiring certification to actually access that model. So we're starting to see those tools becoming available so that organizations can decide what does that look like for them? Where do they want to put the bars? What, they want to lock this down completely? Do they want to let certain user groups have access? Do they just want an audit? So we're going to leave it open, but we want an audit of who's been in, who's done what, how's it been run? So we are seeing those companies starting to tackle this problem. And I would say seeing more in the last couple of months than I've seen in the previous 6 months. So it's one to watch, definitely.
Well, it's all about the speed in which everything arrives, I suppose. That's one of our
just to give you a perspective on speed at which things are moving. So many of the things you see out there right now are barely sort of coming out of the labs, right? So a lot of the research that I see every day coming from the AI community, 15,000 papers submitted to the biggest AI conference right now, which is called NeurIPS, and there's another one called HPE or AAAI, 10,000, 5,000 papers submitted. These are papers at the cutting edge, presenting the latest advances in LLMs, latest advances in AI, barely published, already in a product. It tells you how risky this is, right? It's not been even tested. It's just out there just to bump up certain valuations in some cases, just to keep the momentum in the stock markets. We need to be careful about the froth that's out there right now, and really think about how things have been validated. So one of the key issues we see in the research community is the idea of benchmarking. Where are you getting your data? Who's validated the data set? And we keep finding errors and the inaccuracies in results reported right now, because people have just grabbed the data set somewhere and said, okay, this LLM performs really well on this data set. Where did the data set come from? Who said that was a good data set to use? So there's not enough research done on the data sets used as benchmarks in the first place. And then there are claims, outrageous claims of agency. And we've seen this in the last few years. Even Microsoft has been guilty, been really famous researchers at Microsoft guilty of claiming that we've achieved AGI, or initial versions of artificial general intelligence. So I think the way you tackle this is by having the experts in-house to tell you, yes, this is good, this is not good, or we will test it on our data set in this way, and this is the right data set to use, or we'll clean it up in this way or that way. I think that's where the challenge is right now, because there's so much coming at us every day. We just need to be able to filter all the noise out and then focus on the right stuff.
That's cool. I know Mark's going to have a nice cheery concept or comment for this. So go on, Mark. I mean, I know you'll obviously have views on this. Personal views.
I think we've got to stop deluding ourselves about the way we'll apply ethics when it comes to AI deployments. Just because we write something down, it doesn't mean that's what we're going to do at all, in the slightest. I'm already seeing this left, right and centre across places where it's just not being applied, it's not being measured. I mean, that statement, the one which came out about the 0.5 litre of water, but it's nonsense. It's a made-up number. There's no substance to it whatsoever. We've done some. I'm running a project for the United Nations at the moment where we're assessing the impact of basically what is the problem with sustainability in AI, what's not being measured, and the conclusion we've come to so far is nothing's being measured. So even the papers that you see where people say they've measured it, you get one level in and you realise not a single thing is actually being measured. Everyone's referring to proxies, guesstimates, estimates, and made-up numbers. And the issue with that is when we have done some testing so far, we found the variance in that water metric as an example. We've had a variance from 0.01 litres to 10 litres. So how on earth can we come up with a metric you can trust when that variance is so much? And then we even have providers who are willfully misleading us just to drive marketing and to drive sales as well. So I see white papers coming out where there's one, I won't name them, I've done it in the past, I've got in a load of trouble. They came out and said that deploying AI on X cloud was up to 99% more sustainable. And that word up to was doing so much heavy lifting. And in an organisation that bought on the basis of that being the thing that they were told by a big analyst came in and supported it, a big SI came in and supported it. It's just people shilling nonsense to extract money. That's all they want to do. There's no good coming out of it. We did an assessment on that same platform after it had gone in. So they got a report from the cloud provider that said they consumed 17 tons of carbon on this platform. We did an assessment and found it was actually 8,760 tons of carbon. And the cost was exponentially through the roof. And why I'm so triggered when it comes to the ethics side of things, and people saying we have policies, who cares? No one reads them. They're not implemented. They're not strong. There's no controls. There's no guardrails. There's nothing stopping anyone. And even when you get to the edge, when you get the user behaviour. So we did another test with an organisation where we found that because I mean, how many of you have got gigantic training budgets that you can willfully apply to train all your users to be perfect? I'm guessing the answer is no one whatsoever at all. Don't have budget for it. In AI, that's the most dangerous thing you can possibly do. So we found there was a variance between training of teams. So it's only a small sample set, one organisation, so it's not exactly a big test case. They tested 2 teams. One team was badly trained, one team was well trained. The team that was badly trained took 4 prompts to get to the end result. Sorry, the team that was well trained took 4 prompts. The team that was badly trained took over 30 prompts to get to the same result. So it was a more than 7x increase in the underlying resources being consumed. And for them, they expect that to cost them somewhere north of $500 million of extra spend as a result of that, through underinvesting in training. And then none of that would have been caught by their ethics whatsoever, because that's users consuming the platform. We can't control it, we can't get it in place, and we're not willing to put in the things we already know we should do. Because if you think back to how cloud's deployed now, AI is like cloud on steroids, and the average AI waste across public and private sector is 40%. Sorry, cloud spend is 40%. So 40 pence in every pound you spend is wasted. Doesn't need to be done at all. The scale of that in AI is about 25 times bigger. But apart from that, I am quite positive about it.
Just to come again on the water usage issue, it does have real world consequences, whether we trust the numbers or not. A big data center project in Chile was cancelled because they didn't accept Google's plan around the water usage that the data center would have.
I do worry that the tech industry, data center and cloud industry is putting itself at war with society as well. Because there's a real risk that as we're going to see planning developments cancelled, houses that can't be built, factories that can't be built, simply because the data centres have got priority and have got control. That's one of the things that came in with data centres being classed as critical national infrastructure. That was the most dangerous, stupid mistake that could ever have been made. Because it now means they can rampage through with no controls whatsoever. There's nothing anyone can do to stop them locally at all.
That's why we talk about AI growth zones. So we wonder who's going to actually benefit. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There are better ways you can.
Have I got time to do one more very quick uplifting question? Yeah. Okay.
I've got a good thing you could do if you wanted to.
What?
There is actually a better way you could consider deploying this, but it requires the hardest thing possible, which is central government working with local government, working with decision makers to make better decisions. So I talk about putting AI in the cloud being the worst thing to do, because it is. You could actually put your AI workloads to work for the community good. If we could align local planning with central planning, we could create hubs, AI hubs distributed, where we could be using that heat regeneration to do things like heat homes, to end fuel poverty, to heat factories. There's so many things we could do genuinely for the greater good that would actually genuinely help society. But at the moment, we're not. We're just literally shoveling money out to the hyperscalers as fast as we can.
Right. Last thing I'm going to talk about, with that segue perfectly into it, is sovereignty is something that is high on the agenda. We're all talking about it. Of course, it's another word which has multiple definitions, and it means different things to different people. But when we're talking about sovereignty in public sector, and now the tech industry is also really heavily talking about the need for sovereign solutions, be that resiliency, security, transparency, measurability of things. It's become the new thing that we must all think about and consider. And I guess, Debbie, for you, hardware is advancing all the time. Things are changing, and it's perpetuating the excitement around what the possibilities of this technology can actually deliver in the good ways. But why is sovereignty becoming such a, from somebody from a tech vendor perspective, why is sovereignty becoming such a big topic?
Okay, so it is a big topic. So I'll do a 2-second whistle stop from our perspective, because you may have another view. So obviously we've talked about cloud, and we've talked about, and it was in your film about, there's become more of a nervousness about where is my data. We kind of didn't worry about that when we first adopted cloud. It was like, get everything out of a data center so I can shut my data center and I can put it in the cloud and it's going to save me a load of money. And we all kind of lived through that cycle. But now there's much more awareness of where is my data. So, geopolitical situations, we've seen some situations play out in certain parts of the world where, knowing where your data is and being able to take your data back home if you need to ensure that you can run your economy and your government and your political structure independently has become quite a topic. So what we're seeing at the moment is we're seeing sovereign AI being talked about in the same guise as AI growth zones and sovereign AI. But really at the heart of it, it is the opportunity for the UK government and UK businesses to have an option to build their new generative capability, their accelerated or automated capability around data on-premise in the UK, where we know the data is within the UK sovereign boundary. And that's really the fundamentals of it. Now, there are going to be some parts of certainly the ecosystem that I work within in defence where there are some very, very clear requirements to have data at a sovereign level, but also to share that data with other partners and other collaborative organisations and other collaborative countries. So there are other challenges. That sovereign conversation kind of continues to become fragmented and become a little bit more complex. But from my perspective, and I think from what we see today, the first premise is to know where your data is. And if you don't want your data living outside of the UK, if you have a requirement for that, or you just believe as a business you want to be able to get it within the UK sovereign boundaries, then that's all about having your data within the UK. Now, there's lots and lots of ways that data can either be something that an environment you create yourselves. There are still within a hyperscaler community, sovereign capability within those organizations, and it's a gradient, right? So there's not a one size fits all. So it's a big topic, lots of different levers, lots of different points of view, but primarily born out of, do we want our data? Do we want to know where it is? And if it isn't in the UK, do we want to have it in the UK for whatever that reason is?
Perfect. Right. You can't go last because you're just going to leave that hanging with everybody. So Mark, give us your very short one on this, and then Gopal's going to give us the optimism on the way out to get a drink.
Yeah. There is a real and present danger that of something like, say, the US Cloud Act could be torn up tomorrow morning with no warning whatsoever. And at the moment, every government department is shoveling everything into the public cloud with cloud. Cloud is the answer now. What's the question? Is generally the strategy, and we have to turn that around. Because what we also need to be doing is supporting the UK economy by supporting UK companies. The mass adoption of the public cloud has decimated the UK service provider industry beyond anything else. And a huge amount of the workloads that we deploy are actually not really complicated. They're classic virtual machines and storage. That could and should be delivered by UK companies in UK data centres that are contributing to the UK tax base. And all it requires is the willingness of people to actually buy from them. So we need to stop doing tenders which are purely public cloud, and actually open it up to anything cloud and take into account the real and present risk that we need a backout plan. Because if we woke up tomorrow morning, we find the Cloud Act's gone, you cannot run any of your services in the public cloud full stop. At all. Impossible. You have to pull them straight back out. So we need the ability to back out into UK-based providers that are UK-owned and operated.
I mean, it sounded bad, but I think it's a good thing. Gopal, wrap us up.
Quickly. Big question around, for me, around adopting AI at scale. An anecdote I'll share, I tried to get a bunch of Amazon credits to help the research community, the UK AI research community, to accelerate their startups and research in AI. And I applied for credits at the university last year in March. I still haven't got full approval from the legal team, from the technical team to get those credits. Gone through so many hoops. So that tells you, maybe this is one of the issues with AI adoption in that area. And then maybe you want to have it in-house, and which some of it we're doing with the AI Safety Institute, and have to have these capabilities in-house. But I've seen a really great example of why we do need, or people do need to think about sovereign AI. And by the way, there's an interesting podcast I highly recommend with Jensen Huang and Arthur Mensch from Mistral on the Andreessen Horowitz podcast a couple of weeks ago that talks about sovereign AI in quite deep detail. And one of the points that Jensen makes, and I've heard from Bosun Tijani, from Minister for Digital Economy in Nigeria, was, you want AI to be culturally sensitive. You want it to serve the local needs. And we do have different needs across the UK, across the different nations of the UK. We do need to serve different needs, different languages. And there are questions around reusing existing large language models and augmenting them with additional data, because it will just bring in those biases that you have in existing models, or completely retraining them. And building sovereign AI then has a huge cost in that, forgetting about the hardware side, but on the data side, you need to digitize a lot. You need to get enough data that makes sure that doesn't have too many biases, too many gaps, to make sure that the services you build on top serve the needs of everyone in your community, at least the ones that are most likely to benefit them. On the other side, sovereign AI has a huge cost. Maintaining GPUs that quickly go out of date, sometimes within 2 years, sometimes within 6 months, is a huge cost. You might as well leave that to the market to supply you with the latest technology. So trade-off between culturally sensitive systems and the most up-to-date hardware as well.
Perfect. Thank you. I mean, I keep referencing you, James, because I love the vote and wish I thought of doing that. So I think what I want to do is make sure that I haven't damaged everyone's opinion too much of AI by our conversation. So hands for friend? Foe? Anyone that changed their mind? Oh, one. Uh-oh. Sorry, Sean. Okay, we're all done. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.